Dad mode, waved me off. Freelance work isn't a real job anyway, you spend more time playing games than working. They always said that, and Alex didn't care. Gaming was part of his life, sure, but that PC wasn't just for fun, it was how he earned money and built something entirely his own. The fact that they couldn't see that, or didn't care, was like a slap in the face. He stormed back to his room but couldn't calm down. He texted Miles to tell him what happened. He was just as shocked. Dude, that's insane. They didn't even ask you first. Nope, just sold it for Brielle's stupid event, Alex replied. She's so spoiled, man. You should have hidden the PC or something. Hindsight, right? But at that moment, all Alex could think about was how years of effort were wiped out in an instant, and no one in his family seemed to care. That night, he decided to confront Brielle. He walked into her room and there she was, spinning around in front of her mirror in one of her new dresses. Do you even know what Janet and Greg did to buy you all this stuff? He asked, leaning against her doorframe. She barely glanced at him. What are you talking about? They sold my computer. My $3,600 gaming rig. Gone. Just so you could have your designer haul. She shrugged, still admiring herself. So? It's just a computer. You can always build another one. Alex couldn't believe her indifference. That wasn't just a computer, Brielle. It was years of saving, working, and building. It was my livelihood. Not my problem, she said with a smug grin. It's not like I told them to sell it. She paused for a second, her tone turning defensive. Besides, it's not my fault they thought it was a good idea. They're the ones who actually sold it, not me. Her words made Alex's blood boil. You mentioned it, didn't you? You knew exactly what they'd do and you let it happen. Brielle rolled her eyes, like he was being dramatic. Oh please. Don't act like I control what Janet and Greg do. If they sold your precious little computer, it's because they thought it was the best choice. That's on them, not me. Alex stood there, staring at her. He couldn't believe how heartless she was. She paused for a second and added, maybe if you weren't so obsessed with your little games, you'd understand what's actually important. I have an image to maintain. You're just sitting in your room playing video games all day. He walked out before he said something he'd regret. Talking to Brielle was pointless. She didn't see the problem because she'd never had to work for anything in her life. Everything she wanted was handed to her on a silver platter, and their parents were happy to keep it that way. Over the next few days, things at home were tense. Greg and Janet acted like nothing happened, while Brielle paraded around in her new clothes. Every time he thought about how casually they decided to sell something so important to him, his frustration grew. Miles kept checking in, trying to keep him grounded. You gotta do something, man. Don't let them get away with this. And yeah, here Alex was, right then. He thought Miles was right. He couldn't just sit back and let them treat him like a doormat. But he also kept thinking about sucking it up and ignoring it. He truly didn't know anymore. Do you guys think he's overreacting? If his parents thought they could walk all over him, they were about to learn otherwise. The days that followed were rough. Alex could barely look at Greg and Janet without feeling like his blood was boiling. Every time Brielle waltzed past him, flaunting her designer haul, it was like she was rubbing it in his face. He tried to avoid them as much as possible, holing up in his room with his old beat-up laptop. He used it to get by with freelance work, but it was so slow, like using a toaster to bake a cake. It was a far cry from his custom-built PC. And every time he struggled to meet a deadline or fix a crash, his frustration grew. Miles was a lifeline during all this. He kept Alex sane when he felt like he was drowning in frustration. He'd call at random times just to check in or talk about something completely unrelated, like the latest game updates or a funny meme he'd seen. One night, as Alex was venting again about how ridiculous his family was being, Miles said, "You know what? It's not personal. It's strictly business. Except in your case, they made it personal, and now they're treating it like business. It was personal. This wasn't just some financial transaction. This was his family showing him exactly where he stood in their priorities." At that moment, Alex realized he had to do something, not just to get his computer back, but to make them see they couldn't keep treating him like an afterthought. So he gathered every piece of proof he could find that the PC was his, receipts from the components he'd bought, photos of the build process, and even screenshots of his freelance earnings to show how important it was for his work. He also reached out to the person who had bought the PC. They were sympathetic but firm. No refunds unless he paid them back the $1,200 Greg and Janet had sold it for, and there he was, actually thinking about letting it go. It seemed like too much trouble, and honestly, the thought of confronting his parents again made him want to smash his head against a wall. Do you guys think he's overreacting? Should he just suck it up and move on? Update 1. Terror Hey folks. Alex didn't think things could get messier, but somehow they had. As he'd said before, he was torn between staying silent or confronting his family. But then Miles reminded him, if you don't stand up for yourself now, they'll just keep doing it. They'll think they can take whatever they want from you whenever it's convenient for them. He was right. This wasn't just about the PC anymore. It was about respect . So Alex confronted them at dinner. It felt like the best time to get them all in one place. He sat down at the table, staring at his parents while Brielle scrolled through her phone, completely oblivious. Janet was mid-sentence about some neighborhood gossip when he cut her off. I want my money back, he said, placing a folder of documents on the table. Greg raised an eyebrow. What money? The $1,200 you got from selling my PC, Alex said firmly. I built that computer with my own money. Legally, it belongs to me. You had no right to sell it. Janet let out an exaggerated sigh, like he was a toddler throwing a tantrum. We've already been over this. Your sister needed help, and we made a decision as a family. No, you made a decision for the family without asking me, he shot back. That's theft. Plain and simple. Greg leaned back in his chair, his face darkening. Watch your tone, boy. We're your parents. Everything in this house belongs to us. You live under our roof, so technically that computer was ours. That's not how it works, Alex said, keeping his voice steady even though he wanted to scream. He pulled out a receipt and held it up. This says I paid for the parts with my own money. This is proof that it was mine. And this, he handed them the buyer's copy of the transaction, proves you sold it for $1,200. You owe me. Janet gasped, like he'd just told her he was disowning them. How dare you accuse us of stealing? We did this for Brielle. She's your sister. Family is about sacrifice. Yeah, it seems like I'm the only one making sacrifices, he snapped. Brielle gets everything handed to her, and I'm expected to just roll with it. Not anymore. Either you pay me back, or I'll take legal action. You wouldn't dare, Janet hissed. Try me, Alex said, locking eyes with her. Brielle, who had been silent up until now, finally chimed in. Oh my God, are you seriously threatening Janet and Greg over a computer? You're pathetic. No, Alex said, glaring at her. What's pathetic is that you're perfectly fine with taking advantage of someone else's hard work without a second thought. You knew what they did, and you didn't care. She rolled her eyes. It's not my fault they decided to sell it. I didn't make them do anything. You mentioned it to them. You knew exactly what you were doing, Brielle. She gave him an attitude. I only mentioned your computer because you're always complaining about how busy you are with work, Brielle said. Her voice was calm, like she was the victim here. Appreciate the break? I said, my voice rising. Do you even hear yourself? That computer was my livelihood. Brielle smirked, unfazed. Wow, you're twisting this into my fault. You're the one who's always talking about how you're independent. I figured you wouldn't mind helping out the family for once. Isn't that what being independent is all about? My fist clenched under the table. Helping out? You didn't need a designer hall, Brielle. You just wanted it. There's a difference. She scoffed. Maybe you're just mad because I know how to get what I want, and you're too busy sulking to figure it out. Don't blame me for being better at this than you. I swear I almost slapped her, but Greg slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. Enough, he said. We'll pay you back, but don't expect anything else from us. You're on your own from now on. I laughed bitterly. I've been on my own for years. The difference now is I'm done letting you take advantage of me. The next day, they handed me $1,200 in cash, their faces tight with anger. I took the money without a word. It wasn't a victory, but it was a step forward. I contacted the buyer again, and they agreed to sell the PC back to me for the same price. Picking it up felt like getting a piece of my identity back. But as much as I loved having my rig again, I now know things won't go back to the way they were. My parents and Brielle aren't going to change, and I can't keep living under a roof where I'm treated like a second-class citizen. It's time to figure out my next move. I'm honestly thinking of moving out. Is it a good idea, or am I putting myself in more trouble? Hey, again. So, after my last update, I started brainstorming ways to get out. I knew moving out wasn't going to be easy. I didn't have a huge savings cushion, and rent wasn't cheap. But I had my freelance work, and I was determined to make it work. I called Miles. He had been my sounding board through this whole mess, and I knew he'd have ideas. Dude, you need to get out of there, Miles said as soon as I told him my plan. You can crash at my place for a bit if you need to. Thanks, man, but I think I need my own space. I've been living under their thumb for too long. I just need to figure out how to swing it financially. Miles was silent for a moment, then said, what if you double down on your freelance stuff? You're good at it, and there's definitely demand out there. You could even start streaming again. He wasn't wrong. I dabbled in streaming before, but life had gotten in the way. Now, with my PC back and a fire lit under me, it seemed like the perfect time to give streaming another shot. That night I started researching apartments. My budget was tight, so I focused on small studios or shared housing. After a few hours of scrolling through listings, I found a tiny place a few miles away. It wasn't much, just a single room with a kitchenette and a bathroom, but it was within my price range and close enough to town that I wouldn't feel isolated. I reached out to the landlord, who agreed to meet me the next day for a tour. When I walked into the apartment, it hit me how real this was becoming. The place was bare bones, but I wanted it. I signed the lease that same day and felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The next challenge was packing up my life without tipping off my family. I wasn't planning a dramatic exit, but I also didn't want to give them a chance to guilt-trip me into staying. Over the next week I slowly started moving my stuff out. I'd take a box or two at a time and stash it at Miles's place until I was ready for the final move. Meanwhile, I dove headfirst into freelancing and streaming. I updated my portfolio, reached out to past clients, and even started advertising my services on forums and social media. The response was better than I expected, and within days I had enough work lined up to cover my first month's rent. As move-out day approached, I avoided my family as much as possible. Brielle didn't seem to notice. She was too busy flaunting her latest designer bag on social media. Greg and Janet, on the other hand, seemed to sense something was up. They started dropping little comments at dinner like, "You've been awfully quiet lately," or "Let us know if you're planning anything big." I brushed them off with vague answers, but I could feel their eyes on me. The final straw came 2 nights before my move. I was in my room packing up the last of my gear when Janet knocked on my door. "Can we talk?" she asked, stepping inside before I could even answer. "I don't really have anything to say," I muttered, shuffling papers on my desk. "Just hear me out," she said, sitting on the edge of my bed like everything was normal. "We didn't sell your computer to hurt you. Brielle mentioned it when we were trying to figure out how to help her. She said you didn't use it much anymore and that it was worth a lot of money. We thought it might be a good idea." I turned to face her, my jaw tightening. "So you're saying this was Brielle's idea?" She sighed, looking almost guilty. "Not exactly, but she suggested it, and we thought she made a valid point. You've always been so independent, we thought you'd understand. Understand that you sold something I worked years for because Brielle wanted a new wardrobe?" I snapped. Janet flinched but didn't respond. Instead, she stood up and left, as if her half-hearted explanation was supposed to make everything better. That's the kind of person Brielle was. Drop a hint here, act innocent there, and suddenly her ideas became my parents' plans. The morning of my move came faster than I expected. I loaded the last of my boxes into the car and left a note on the kitchen counter. It wasn't dramatic, just a few lines explaining that I needed space and time to focus on myself. I knew if I tried to explain in person they'd guilt me into staying. Miles met me at the apartment to help unload. As we set up my PC in the corner of the room, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. That night I went live on my stream for the first time in months. The viewer count was small, but it didn't matter. I was in my own space, doing something I loved. Leaving should have been the end of the drama, but it wasn't. I had freelance gigs to tackle and a stream schedule to figure out, yet a nagging thought kept creeping in. Did Greg and Janet even care I was gone? By mid-afternoon I got my answer. Janet called. When I didn't pick up, She left a voicemail. You could have at least told us you were leaving. Your father and I are very disappointed in how you handled this. Family is about sticking together, not running away. I deleted it without finishing. A few minutes later Greg tried calling, but I ignored him too. Then came the text barrage. You've really hurt your mother. We've always done what we thought was best for you. You're being reckless. I silenced my phone and went back to work. But that evening, while setting up my stream, a new message popped up from Brielle. You left? LOL. Guess you couldn't handle it. Anyway, Mom's freaking out, so you might want to call her before she has a meltdown. Classic Brielle. I didn't even bother replying. The next few weeks were a mix of progress and lingering frustration. Freelance gigs picked up, and my streaming audience slowly grew, but my parents wouldn't stop trying to reel me back in. The texts alternated between guilt trips and outright anger. One evening Miles came over to hang out. So, have your parents calmed down yet? He asked. Nope, I said. They're still texting me like I owe them an explanation. You think they'll ever let it go? Probably not. But I'm not going back. Living there wasn't healthy. They don't respect me, and they never will. Miles gave me a knowing look. Yeah, but have you told them that? I paused. He had a point. I'd been ignoring them, but I hadn't confronted the root of the problem. Maybe I needed to say my piece for my own peace of mind. The next day I typed out a message. I've made my decision, and I'm not coming back. This isn't about being selfish, it's about doing what's best for me. I've spent years feeling like my needs didn't matter, and I can't keep living like that. I hope you'll respect my choice, but if not, I'm still moving forward without you. I hit send and felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't expecting a positive response, and I didn't get one. Janet replied with a long, rambling message about how I was being ungrateful, and how Brielle's happiness had always been their priority because she needed more support. Greg followed up with a blunt, "You'll regret this someday." But instead of feeling hurt or angry, I felt freed. At least I didn't feel the need to argue or explain myself further. Their words didn't hold the same power they used to. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into my work and streaming. One day, while scrolling through social media, I came across a post from Brielle. It was a selfie of her holding a designer purse with the caption, "So grateful for my amazing parents who always prioritize what matters." I rolled my eyes and kept scrolling. I didn't need to engage. Let her have her little fantasy world. It wasn't my problem anymore. A few days later, a family friend ran into me at a coffee shop. "I heard you moved out," they said, raising an eyebrow. "Your parents are having a tough time, you know. They've been asking everyone for help." I frowned. Help? What do you mean?" "They've overextended themselves buying things for Brielle. I think they thought you'd still be there to pitch in." I shrugged, taking a sip of my coffee. "That's unfortunate." And I meant it was unfortunate for them. For me, I'm doing great without them. After that conversation with the family friend, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of validation. My parents' finances falling apart wasn't something I took joy in. It just confirmed what I'd known for a long time. They'd prioritized Brielle's wants over the family's stability for years, and now they were dealing with the consequences. Meanwhile, I was finally learning what it meant to be independent, and I wasn't about to let their choices drag me back into their chaos. That didn't stop the guilt trip texts from coming, though. Janet's messages became more desperate. "We're struggling here, and you've left us to deal with everything on our own." Then there was Greg's favorite line, "If you were a good son, you'd help your family in their time of need." A good son? That was rich, coming from someone who couldn't even acknowledge my hard work, let alone respect it. Brielle stayed silent, though she didn't reach out, and honestly, I didn't expect her to. She probably figured she'd let our parents do the heavy lifting and wait for me to cave. One day, Ethan came over again. He had a grin like he had something big to tell me. "Guess who I ran into at the store today?" he said as we sat down. "Who?" I asked, already knowing it was probably someone connected to my family. "Your mom," Ethan said, chuckling. "She cornered me by the frozen pizzas and went on this whole rant about how you've abandoned them. She even said you're being influenced by bad company, which I'm assuming is me." I rolled my eyes. "Of course she did. What did you say?" "I told her you're doing great, and maybe if they respected you more, you wouldn't have had to leave," Ethan said, smirking. "She didn't take it well." I laughed, but inside, it stung a little. Not because of what Mom said at this point, I was used to her dramatics, but because it was another reminder of how little they understood me. They weren't upset because they missed me. They were upset because they'd lost control. A few days later, Mom sent another text, this one different from the others. Your sister's birthday is coming up. We'd like you to come home for dinner. It would mean a lot to her. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to believe this was their way of extending an olive branch, but I knew better that it wasn't about reconciliation, it was about appearances. They wanted to play happy family for a night, and I was supposed to pretend everything was fine. I showed Ethan the text, and he shook his head. Don't do it, man. They're just going to pull you back into their drama. I know, I said, sighing. But if I don't go, it's just going to give them more ammo to say I'm the bad guy. Who cares what they say? Ethan shot back. You're not living your life for them anymore. You don't owe them anything. He was right, of course, deep down, I knew that, but saying no to my family, even after everything, was harder than I wanted to admit. So, I did something I hadn't done since I moved out. I called Mom when she picked up. Her voice was dripping with fake warmth. Oh, honey, it's so good to hear from you. Hey, Mom, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I got your text about Tiffany's birthday. Yes, we're having a nice dinner, just the family, she said quickly. Tiffany would love for you to be there. I don't think I can make it, I said firmly. I'm really busy with work right now, and honestly, I don't think it would be a good idea. There was a long pause before she responded. You're really going to let your sister down like this? After everything we've done for you? And there it was, the guilt card, right on schedule. Mom, this isn't about Tiffany. It's about the fact that every time I try to have a relationship with you guys, it feels like I'm the only one putting in any effort. I'm not coming to dinner because I'm done pretending everything's fine when it's not. She didn't take it well, to say the least. Fine, she said. If you want to throw your family away, that's your choice. But don't come crying to us when you realize what you've lost. That was the last straw, Mom. I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval, and it's never been enough. So no, I'm not throwing anything away. I'm just finally putting myself first. Goodbye. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking. It felt like cutting a rope that had been holding me back for years. I wasn't sure what would come next, but I knew I couldn't keep living in their shadow. After that call, I blocked Mom and Dad's numbers. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew it was necessary. The constant texts and calls weren't helping anyone, and I needed space to focus on my own life. Tiffany didn't even bother reaching out, which honestly made things easier with the family drama out of the picture. I was able to throw myself fully into my work and streaming. One night, while I was streaming, someone in the chat asked, "What made you start streaming?" For a moment, I hesitated. I hadn't talked about my family situation publicly. It felt too personal. But then I realized it didn't matter. I started streaming because it's something I'm passionate about, I said, but also because I wanted to prove to myself that I could build something on my own, without anyone holding me back. The chat lit up with messages like respect and you're an inspiration, dude. It felt good to know people appreciated what I was doing, not just for the gameplay, but for the story behind it. As the weeks turned into months, I noticed that I wasn't angry anymore. I still didn't want a relationship with my parents or Tiffany, but I didn't feel the need to dwell on it. Cutting ties had given me the peace I needed to move forward, and for the first time, I felt truly free. One day, Ethan and I were hanging out, and he asked, "So, do you think they'll ever apologize?" I shrugged, probably not. But honestly, I don't need them to. I'm finally living my life on my own terms, and that's enough for me. And it was. Now, I'm building a life where my hard work is valued, and my passions are celebrated, not dismissed. To anyone reading this and dealing with something similar, you don't have to stay where you're not respected, you deserve better, and walking away isn't giving up. It's choosing yourself. To anyone out there struggling to be seen by the people who should have loved you first, know this: you are not hard to love. You're just trying to bloom in the wrong soil. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what stunts your growth. Choose peace. Choose purpose. And most of all, choose yourself. Because healing isn't selfish, it's survival.